Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is none of your business, but you can call me Bizcoon, and today we are reacting to a Let's Talk Religion video entitled, Is This the Most Ancient Shrine of Mary? For those that don't know, this right here is Philip Holm, or Holmes, I don't remember which, and he talks about religion, hence his name, Let's Talk Religion. He mostly talks about things pertaining to Islamic history and Islamic studies specifically, and has a tendency to talk about more Sufi adjacent things. But here we're talking about a shrine that is dedicated to Mary, presumably Mary, the mother of Jesus. Now, if you're new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe, but make sure you watch Philip's video first so that you can show some support. I'll link his video in the description. One thing I do know about the veneration of Mary is that part of it stems back to something called the cult of Isis. And not that Isis, but this Isis, or rather Isis as it would have been pronounced back then, who is a major goddess within the Egyptian pantheon. The cult of Isis was something that was known to the Romans, along with various other, I guess we can call them mystery cults, but I don't think mystery cults is the correct word. But regardless of whether or not the veneration of Mary actually goes back to that, because it has to do with, Isis and Osiris having Horus, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, that kind of thing. People tend to connect it to something like that, which people use as a means of saying that it's based on pagan tradition, which I'm not even going to get into that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
This is the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore, the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Scholars agree that this is one of the earliest churches here in Rome. It's one of the four so-called papal churches and one of the most significant in the Catholic Church. It's dedicated, as the name suggests, to Mother Mary, and indeed it might be the earliest such shrine dedicated to Mary, definitely in Rome, but also really in the world. Scholars believe that it was constructed sometime in the 430s AD.
These little frescoes and stuff, they're always so beautiful. I don't know if you guys know this, but the first 7 years of my life I was raised Catholic, and during that time I also went to a Catholic school until second grade. And most of the time, whenever we had mass or general church meetings, I never really paid attention to any of the sermons. I was always too busy admiring the architecture, looking at all the lights and chandeliers and all that stuff, and also waiting for my communion wafer. I remember between kindergarten and first grade, I was like, when are we gonna get our little whatever cookies? I didn't know what they were at the time. And it wasn't until second grade that we would actually get to enjoin in the Eucharist, communion wafers and all that. But let's keep going.
And specifically in the aftermath of the Council of Ephesus. Now, this is one of the early church councils that determined certain aspects of Christian orthodoxy.
And this is not to be confused with the Council of Nicaea, which was the one that also a common misconception based on popularized by the Da Vinci Code is that the Council of Nicaea was where the books of the Bible were decided, and that, yeah, they were the ones that decided what was canon. Technically, when you actually do the research, you'll find that the books in the canon were mostly agreed upon because those books were the most popular in various Christian circles and have very little to do with what the higher-ups had to say. The Council of Nicaea was more about doctrine than anything else. I guess similar to this Council of Ephesus. I think that's what he said.
And specifically what was discussed at this council was whether or not Mary could be called the Mother of God, Theotokos.
Mother of God? It's all toilet sounds!
In Greek. And so some believed that this was a legitimate term for her, others did not. And this, of course, boiled down to a certain Christological debate, whether or not the divine and human natures of Christ are separated from each other. And so what would become the majority of the church, orthodoxy, so to say, they believed that indeed Christ was, of course, fully human and fully divine, and thus that...
This is what's known as the two natures doctrine, where he was both fully divine and fully human, as opposed to the Ethiopian Tewahedo church. Tewahedo being of the same origin as Arabic Tawheed, which means, well, etymologically it means to become one, but it's usually translated as monotheism, or at the very least oneness, where in the context of at least Ethiopian Tewahedo, it means that Jesus only has one nature, and that was his human nature. But, of course, they still generally believe that he was the Son of God and stuff.
Mary was legitimately, or could legitimately be called the Mother of God because of that. Another group believed that that was an illegitimate position because they believed that the human and divine natures of Christ were somehow separated, and this was a position that was associated with a guy called Nestorius. And so, even though it is...
I'm trying to read that, but it's kind of hard to read.
You can argue whether or not that's legitimately his position. That became the position associated with what became known as Nestorianism, which was a very popular form of Christianity. It still survives today in the so-called Church of the East, right? So this was the...
Oh, yeah, the ones practiced by, like, the Armenians and the Syriacs, I believe. Like, I know that Egypt kind of has its own thing going on, and I just mentioned Ethiopia. I mean, the three main branches that people know are of Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, and Protestants. But there are plenty of other branches that are kind of independent of those, although they are kind of based on each other. I mean, one of the differences between some of them is what books are in and what books aren't. Like, the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox pretty much have the same number of books. The Oriental Church that Philip just mentioned, practicing primarily the Middle East, actually has 2 less books than the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox. I know that various Protestant denominations have extra books that are usually considered deuterocanonical, meaning that they're not quite as important as some of the others, but they're at the very least inspired. And then there's Egypt, which has 2 additional books of 1st and 2nd Clement, because presumably in reference to Clement of Alexandria. And then Ethiopia has all the books, so they pretty much got the others beat.
Originating point when the Church of the East and the so-called Nestorians separated from the rest of the church over precisely this question of the relationship between the divine and human natures of Christ, and therefore also the status of Mary as the Mother of God. And so it seems that the Pope at the time, after this council in 431, when Mary was declared to be the Mother of God, the Pope...
just look, all of these frescoes, artworks, and statues, they're all very... Oh, I mentioned it before that, yeah, as a kid, I would always just look at the architecture, and you can see, like, I know that within, like, the Sistine Chapel, they have, like, different biblical events painted on the roof. I believe it was, like, I don't remember which Italian Renaissance man it was, but you know what I mean.
Called for this church, or this basilica, to be built in honor of Mary. And so for that reason, it's very, very significant. It's a beautiful cathedral, or basilica, excuse me, that contains many different chapels and significant relics. For example, right on the main altar, there is a place where it is believed that part of the manger that the infant Christ lay in is in fact in there. And there's a beautiful sort of...
A lot of different shrines throughout the Middle East claim to contain certain relics, or even like actual figures within them. Like, I know that there are a few like shrines within the Levant that claim to have the remains of like the biblical patriarchs like Abraham and stuff, but whether or not they actually do contain them, you know damn well that they're never going to let us excavate or open them up.
Of shrine to that relic. The basilica also contains one of the most significant and famous icons of Mother Mary, called, at least in translation, the protector of the people of Rome.
Salus Populi Romani. Well, he didn't put in the phonemic vowel length, so I'm just assuming at that point.
And it's an icon of Mary holding the child Christ with a Bible in his hand. And this is maybe the centerpiece, at least one of the centerpieces of this basilica. In this beautiful chapel, you can see that. I'll probably show an image of it on screen right now. So a very significant church, one of the most important basilicas here in Rome and really for the Catholic Church. So significant that the recently deceased Pope Francis chose to be buried right here. And there is a
Oh, that's nice.
beautiful, very simple.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, that's at least he's buried where he wanted to be.
Bare bones burial that you can find there, very much reflective of his style as a pope. You know, he would wear simple clothing. He
Right.
lived a life of simplicity in imitation of Christ to some degree, but also Saint Francis, of course, and that's definitely reflected in the burial place in there, dedicated to Pope Francis. And right now, of course, because at the time of recording this, he only passed about a month ago, I think, a bit more than a month ago. So it's still very fresh, and there are people coming here very much as pilgrims, specifically to visit and pay their respects to Pope Francis. So
That's
for all
nice.
these reasons, this is an incredibly important and very beautiful basilica here in Rome, with an incredible history as well as a very significant present.
Of sober mind. Just look. They're all so pretty. It's all, even if you don't really believe in such things, you can at least appreciate what they have to offer in terms of like architecture and stuff. Sorry to speak over the music, but I have to at least try to add some stuff to it. All the details on these pillars and stuff. Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to make a little quick video just so I have, you know, just a little bit of filler. It's nice to, you know, just take a little look at some of the some marvels of the world that might not necessarily be as well known as others, but either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this little brief little video, just as a little, I guess we can call it a filler video. But if you guys like this, go ahead, like, subscribe, make sure you watch this video first, and I guess I'll see you guys next time.